Welcome to the Den, the Dark Entertainment Network. I'm the Gothic Rose, and this is the dark tale of the day. Yes, dear fiends of the Den, the Dark Entertainment Network is a channel where the news meets conspiracy theories. It makes babies in my brain and it comes out my mouth. We explore the darkest stories from the deepest corners of Hollywood and the world. If you like this sort of entertainment, be sure to like, follow, and hit that bell because I am not going to stop. Hello, dear fiends of the Den. We are back with more haunted history of Hollywood, and the weather has turned again in New York. It is cloudy, a little rainy, and in the high 60s, as opposed to the last 2 days that were well over 100. One day so bad I could not even record in the studio because the house is 202 years old and it is as hot or cold as the elements themselves. But we were talking about the handlers. We've been talking about the fixers. But have you heard of the Hollywood Wranglers? Let's talk about this covert group in Hollywood. 1920s Hollywood. Have you heard of the Wranglers? They were never in the credits. They were never seen on camera, but without them, the stars would have crumbled faster than a bad script under pressure. So we are going to slip past the stage lights and creep into the alleys behind the sound stages where the Hollywood dream was held together not by magic, but by manipulation. In the 1920s, before the term handler ever made its way into variety, there were the Wranglers. The Wranglers were a covert group of studio chosen shadows assigned to watch the beautiful, the broken, and the bankable. They carried mirrors instead of masks, and they reflected what the public wanted to see, hiding everything else. Some were loyal, some were spies. All were expendable, because who isn't in Hollywood? Wranglers are both old Hollywood and new Hollywood. And if you listen to my hot mess of Hollywood, that always creeps in a little bit. And we'll be talking a little bit about that this particular weekend. I'm really excited. But let's find out what these early talent wranglers did, what they were. So they weren't called that yet. These job titles existed under the guise of studio chaperones, whom were often assigned to young actresses to monitor behavior and ensure they held up the studio's moral image. The press agents, which we talked about yesterday, who sometimes doubled as a handler, they managed public appearances and spun stories to keep the stars in good graces. So just modern PR agents. And then what was called production assistants or handlers. And these were tasked with keeping actors on schedule, sober and camera ready, especially during shoots, during press tours. But the Wranglers were the first line of defense before a fixer was called in. What they would do is report back to the studio heads, and they would sometimes act as informants if a star was seen as difficult or rebellious. In modern day Hollywood, the Wranglers still exist, especially on film sets and TV sets, but it's a more professionalized and segmented part of Hollywood. So, what you would know as a modern day talent wrangler would be a talent coordinator, someone who manages schedules, transportation, and on set needs for the actors. And then there are the celebrity wranglers who escort stars at events. It keeps them on scripts and acts as a buffer between talent and press or fans. And then there are animal wranglers, and that would be someone who would train and manage animal actors on set. But the celebrity wranglers that escort stars to events are often the same talent coordinators who manage their schedule and transportation. So the lines get muddled between what these people do, and then they become the girlfriend, the boyfriend, the significant other, the live in. It's very, very interesting. So there are a few Wrangler stories of people who, had become the fixers, who have to wrangle these stars in like the spotlight when they're going off key, when they're going off kilter, when they're going off the rails. The problem is there are so many celebrities now, from musicians, actors, models, that have their own companies, their own production companies, things like this, that they have more power than the studios did back then. So the Wranglers don't quite work as well with certain stars all the time. We know the studio chaperones assigned to ingenues in the olden days, the old Hollywood days, like Clara Bow and Judy Garland. They had chaperones who ensured that these young stars held up the studio's moral image: no drinking, no dating the wrong people, and no stepping out of line. Yesterday, I spoke about press agent Harry Reichenbach, who staged all of these publicity stunts, and Eddie Mannix and Howard Strickling, who were the technical fixers, but they often deployed the Wranglers to monitor stars like Jean Harlow or Loretta Young, especially when a scandal was brewing, and these two were particularly scandal clad back in the day. But have you heard of the Velvet No? This is a rumored MGM staffer, a woman, and she was said to be the go to woman for quietly shutting down scandals involving pregnancies, affairs, or breakdown. She was never named in the trades, but whispered about on the lot. The Velvet No was a woman, but never named, never credited, never photographed, and never quoted. But her fingerprints were all over the polished surfaces of the golden age, and she was the one who made sure the illusion stayed intact without ever raising her voice. We need more people like this in Hollywood today. And just a few modern day actors and famous people known to have Wranglers are Jennifer Lawrence, Britney Spears, I've spoken about, Tom Cruise, and child actors Millie Bobby Brown or Jacob Tremblay. So everyone has their team to help them along. And it seems like the ones that have the teams manage to get over the scandals a little bit quicker, manage to get through the blind items and hold their head a little bit higher because they have a team of good people behind them. But some of the stars today that are completely unraveling due to the fact that they are not listening to their teams or don't have the Wranglers because they think they know better, you're not doing yourself any favors. You know who I'm talking about. It's that whole "it ends with us" trial, and I almost have fatigue from that at this time. So we're going to get into some of these Wrangler stories throughout the 20s, and as I get further into decades, those stories will pop back in. But I needed to let you guys know what these secretive Wranglers were, because I had only heard of the fixers and the handlers. But the Wranglers, much more covert, and we're going to go into this deeper with how it affected the actors that they helped. And remember, not everyone, no matter how hard these fixers, handlers, or wranglers tried, could be helped. But most Hollywood people who had scandals, Hollywood celebrities who had scandals, had a comeback. If you have any stories you'd like to share or would like to be a guest in the den, please email me at welcometothedenpodcast@gmail.com. Must be 21 and over. And if you like dark, creepy stories as much as I do here in the den, please like, subscribe, and hit that bell. And as always, thank you for joining me here at the Dark Entertainment Network.